Welcome, everyone, to What the Force. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, your host, and this is Andor Declassified. We will be speaking about Narkina 5, Episode 8 of the Andor series, streaming on Disney+. Joining me for this and every other episode of this series is my good friend and yours, Alex Kane.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
I like, you know, you've got a key, you're always invited, you know, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, this episode. You know, I really want to get into the writer and the director of this episode in particular, because the show seems to like be building on itself and be getting better and more tense. Like, let's not like downplay that. But what did you think about this episode?
It's sort of like the signposts are a little bit louder in some of the like where it's all leading, and that's kind of fun. Like you kind of, you know, see the powder keg ready to go off, and we're kind of like things are going to get really crazy in the next episode or two. You know, kind of like we did on, you know, the green planet in the previous arc. So that's kind of fun.
Yeah, on
sort of
Aldhani. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sort of like happening again, where.
But it's more intense now, right? Like there's more at stake for us personally.
Yeah,
we're so attached to Cassian at this point.
Yeah. And the other remaining characters too. And we've kind of seen, you know, it is sort of that kind of story where we know that nobody is necessarily safe, you know, except for the ones who are in Rogue One and beyond. But that adds to the tension.
For me, it was a very, very intense episode. And I have a few things I want to talk about that before we get into the show. It almost showed you like throughout the show, miniature groundworks of rebellion through this microcosm of the prison and like the prison working center. And it's almost like they're setting us up to show that this prison break is an excellent trial ground for all of the lessons that you need to learn to create a rebellion on a larger scale. Mm-hmm. Right. And I want to talk a little bit about the writer and the director just momentarily. Do you have any things to say about them before I kind of...
Not off the top of my head. I've already kind of forgotten. The director
writer,
is from the Americans, I think?
Or? It's Toby Haynes again, and he directed 1, 2, 3 of Andor, and he's now directing 8 to 10. So 8, 9, 10. So it's like another arc of the show, and then there's going to be kind of like two. I feel like it's going to be like a finale, 2 episodes at the end. So the writer himself, actually, I'm going to talk about Toby Haynes first because I'm kind of already on him. He's responsible for the most appreciated episode of Sherlock, the Reitenbach Fall.
Okay.
Which is like the one where it looks like Sherlock is falling off the building, and it blew up the internet when it happened. It was an amazing Sherlock episode. He's also been voted one of the most popular directors of Doctor Who in the modern age. So,
nice.
And also he was Emmy nominated for his episode of The Black Mirror, which was the USS Callister, which I haven't seen The Black Mirror, so I can't speak to that, but I have seen the episode of Sherlock, and it is exceptionally tense and amazing. And I feel like the tense anxiety nature of what we were experiencing in this episode is going to be mild as we get into the next episodes.
Sure.
The writer is Beau Willimon, who is responsible for adapting the British version of House of Cards to the American version of House of Cards, and actually was one of the showrunners. And he wrote the first episode of House of Cards and several episodes, especially in the first and second season. And I'm obsessed with this quote that was on IMDb for him. I want to learn more about this guy because he's really, really fascinating and introspective in a way that Star Wars can only benefit from. So he said, starting out, you have this sophomoric idea that you're really trying to reach people. But what But what you actually do is discover that you're talking to yourself. The things you're trying to explore are the things you need to explore to a degree that other people find it entertaining, enlightening, provocative, or what have you. That's a happy byproduct. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's great.
That's exactly what I love to hear from a creator in Star Wars or any property, that they understand that they're understanding their own shadow. We got the same sort of statement from Rian Johnson just after The Last Jedi, that he benefits from exploring his own stuff on the page.
Yeah.
Right.
Nice.
It will resonate with more people if you're actually trying to look through yourself.
Yeah.
Isn't that fascinating?
It's harder to do. It's harder to do. I think it's like a tougher way to work, but like it's always where the good stuff comes from.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time listening to like screenwriting podcasts, and ironically, Jon Favreau's little truism is the thing that really sticks to me, and that's like, you've got to hug the cactus.
You don't use people's first names or names in scripts? No?
Which it's funny because, you know, we tend to think of Favreau as kind of cold and distant sometimes, but like I do love that analogy of like,
yeah,
you know, you have to like, John Clute once read one of my short stories, and he's sort of like this very intellectual critic guy who, you know, is a lot smarter than I am. And he said something about like, you got to get to the nitty gritty of the thing or something like that. And meaning like the life experience, the human condition. And
yeah. And it's going to feel better. I don't know. It's going to speak to more of our subconscious if it is actually speaking subconscious to subconscious somehow.
Yeah.
So,
and people recognize it, you know? Yeah.
Like, yeah. And they'll recognize it even if they're not actively aware that you're doing it, you know,
sure.
like, or actively aware that this is even a thing, you know,
right.
If you're speaking the language of the night from an Ursula K. Le Guin perspective, it will speak to you.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've heard nothing but that people felt very anxious during this episode. How did you feel?
Well, it's like all these sort of different characters on different trajectories, but the way language is used is to kind of tell us like where things are going. That was really nice. There were sort of words that were reused. Repetition, you know, is kind of like a popular sort of literary device. And we had slip, we had fall, we had things of that nature. We had language talking about sleep, which connotes dreams or the unconscious mind. But like, I don't know, to me that was kind of the beauty of this episode. You know, the sort of like random inmate at the prison and Marva both like fell, you know, like just like these different little weird poetic things that it's doing.
It was poetic in its visual and story cuts. Like, and its transitions. So, we'll get into that when we get down into the story a little bit more. Mm-hmm. But it's so well constructed as a storytelling like vehicle that it uses all of its available tools to tell its story, and that's symbolism. That's using classical mythical storytelling. And so I'm like in my element. I'm super excited about this episode. But I did want to talk about one thing, which is like a lot of people had a lot of anxiety about Cassian being wrongfully, you know, committed to a sentence and serving it out and then having the society basically throw away the key. Right. And this is something that is handled in literature, in classical literature, in very oppressive societies. Like you think about Les Miserables and how the protagonist, you know, stole a loaf of bread to feed his family and is like given this massive sentence and then like runs away from it and is given an even more massive sentence that is like unable to keep up with, right? We also get this in Count of Monte Cristo. Like there's this idea that society is like too big sometimes for people to really grasp. And I really wanted to talk about this fear of false incarceration or unjust incarceration and like what it actually represents to us a little bit. And truthfully, people in our society have this fear based entirely on the lack of privilege that they have, based on the color of their skin, the amount of money that they have, their sexual orientation, gender identity, etc. People who are on the fringes of society or considered to be or are treated as lesser in society have more of this fear of the unjust society because the majority does not view them as, as worthy of public outcry, right? And so when we have the fear of the unjust incarceration, it's because we fear that the confidence in our social constructs is misplaced.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. And as soon as you have an unjust incarceration, you automatically, it degrade everybody who is affected by it. Right. So if it was an unjust incarceration of a public figure, that would degrade the public confidence in the system and would force people to look at the social contract that they have with the system of government, whatever that is, like the dictator or, in our democracy, right? So it's in a democracy's best interest to ensure fair and court justice systems. It is maybe not as in favor of in dictatorships to ensure fair, just court systems, except that they are fair and just for the people in power.
Yeah.
Right. And so what it really does is when we have unjust incarcerations is it awakens people to the bad social contract that they're in, which is exactly what Luthen wants. And we fear that the society, that you're going to get caught up in the wrong situation. And I think for the most part, everybody kind of fears it. We have this anxiety when we're driving down the road and we see the lights of a police officer behind us, and some people have a bigger fear about that because of the lack of privilege that they have within the society, because it could mean not just an arrest or a ticket, it could mean death. And that's where the anxiety is real and it could be worse for other people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people have sort of weird dreams about the justice system or, just this idea that we know that the game is rigged and
it's kind of appropriate. It's like the Halloween episode in some ways because it's like the horrors of society and the wrong crime thing is something many people face in it today. Yeah. And it is horrifying because it means that the agreement that you had as an individual to play nice in society is not being upkept.
Yeah.
Right. So in that case, you are no longer bound by the social contract. I think that's really important to punctuate, right? If the society is not fair and just, you are no longer bound by the social contract.
Yeah, and the power flows in one direction, and we see that throughout this episode in different ways, like where order in the sort of imperial sense is it works when it's shaped like a pyramid, and God forbid, all these laborers realize that if they all work together, they could take down Andy Serkis real damn quick and the people in charge of him. And, Lando has a good line in Rise of Skywalker, ironically, that, there are more of us, Poe, there are more of us. And that's a good line. There's not a lot of great lines in that movie necessarily, but I do like that one. I do love that line. That's kind of, how order is maintained, that illusion that, that brutalist architecture you point out a lot of the episodes, like just that idea of
and that
the illusion of
you have no choice, you have no options. That's also like the consent by subjugate, or like that you consent because you have no choice. That's like another thing about it. I just encourage people to like, the entire point is that you have to question your governments all the time. And if you live in a society with an unfair justice system, it's the biggest sign of a unfair social contract with its populace. That's all.
Yeah. And a lot of the things that are in this episode to like illustrate all this stuff are the same things that George Lucas was afraid of back in the day, when he was started out. If you look at the news today and, look at these tech companies, we live in like the surveillance state that the 20th century was so afraid of, we were there. So yeah, this episode is kind of a tough watch.
It is. Yeah. I also think that the music lends into that, and it's got that anxiety synth that that it creates like the feeling of anxiety. It's almost like horror movie synth, like it's wild throughout, especially the prison scenes, and it ratchets up throughout the course of the episode, and a strategic use of no music is also been used as well, which is really great. I will think a lot about the score of this show because it's blending so much interesting things together that I'm very happy to hear it. It's really cool.
Yeah. It started going in this direction last episode, but this episode it was very, like you said, that sort of synth horror movie vibe. And the episode ends with like, basically it just sort of doesn't cut the tension. It's like only getting worse, which is fun.
Yeah. I also have one last thought before we get into kind of the details of the episode and all the cool things within, that we cannot lose track that Cassian started this looking for his sister.
Right.
And I don't want to lose that, because if they never come back to it, I feel like I trust the writers. I actually trust them like a lot more than I trust any of the other writers we've had thus far for shows for Star Wars. But I need some resolution on his sister, because it's where his journey started. It's what caused him to feel like, there was something wrong with his world. He was missing that side of himself, his anima.
Like he was running, and to him, she was his reason for this like man on the run, state that he's been in. And here we have him in a prison, so he can no longer run. But then also, you have Marva saying in like what the previous episode or the one before that, like, the one place they can never get me is my head. And so it's like, not only can he not run because he's in prison, but also he, you can't run from like your mind or whatever. So I feel like all the symbolism to me is still like he has to, there's all sorts of stuff set up with like Cinta and Vel saying like with Luthen in his head, we don't want him out there with Luthen in his head. And here he is in a box with Luthen in his head. And so, to me, like it is all still pointing in that, like he's got to be reborn and emerge from the prison.
Yeah.
And then
buried the lead here.
Yeah. Sorry. Anyway. But yeah. Like I think we have a lot of the same kind of read on this episode from the sounds of it.
It was super symbolic, and so I'm actually going to group kind of chunks together, like the sort of I'm gonna try to group things a little bit more together instead of the cutting back and forth, because you lose the thread of like what's kind of going on a little bit. So I might just continue on to like the next scene with a couple of these things, but we're going to cover everything. It's just, I feel like, and then they went back to this thing is a little like distracting from what we're trying to talk about, which is this episode was constructed in such a way to actually give you a very specific experience. And we'll get into that in just a moment, but it's absolutely fascinating. Are you ready to get into it?
Sure.
The episode starts out and opens. He's coming through a tunnel and he is being transported off-world. He says his name and they say, yes, you're heading to
Narkina 5.
Narkina 5. Yeah. And he's like, what? I'm just a tourist. Yeah. One of the important things about Star Wars is consistently getting into a spaceship and going off into space is considered to be a gateway, right? So it's a gateway into the unknown. He doesn't know where he's going. And immediately he is being taken to the belly of the whale, right? Mm-hmm. Literally in the ocean, the belly of the whale, and where he will get, which is his lowest point, his catabasis. He will be going to his lowest point somewhere in this journey. We've seen lots of examples of this in the recent shows. Mandalorian, the prisoner episode, where he is on the prison ship and he has to go through kind of like the maze of the prison ship. That's an example of a catabasis. Obi-Wan himself starts out in his catabasis phase of his whole journey. He's at his lowest point where he is. He lives in a cave, literally. This is catabasis comes from the ancient Greek, which kata means down and basis means go. So you go down, right? You're going, it's a journey to the underworld or the unknown. And he is not quite at his lowest point when he enters it, but journeying into something symbolically in the ocean through a mouth like he is super mythical.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. First, we get him loaded onto the transport and the guard yells at them to take off their shoes. Mm-hmm. And boots, sandals, everything on the floor. Okay. Let's talk about shoe symbolism, Alex.
Sure. Yeah.
What does it mean for you to be shoeless?
Well, I think like here it's like vulnerability. It's like nakedness. Mm-hmm. I was sort of like an art minor until I wasn't in college. So it always has like these connotations of like intimacy and like almost like marriage, like this is where you belong. This is where you're going to be faithful. Like barefootedness had like a sexual thing.
Yeah. Sometimes, yeah. And also like a child, a concept, having shoes on, right, means your feet are protected and they could have status or individualization meaning, right? So I am in construction, so I wear steel-toed boots, or I am an office worker, and so I wear really nice shined shoes, or I don't have a lot of money, and so my shoes have a lot of holes in them, right? They show who you are, right? And so taking away those shoes, the sandals, the boots, is a forced back to sort of like nothing, right? Like pre who you are. And we're given an environment, like as an example, gloves have been used in the show symbolically to show occupation on Ferrix, right? They all hang up their individualized gloves. Yeah. They all have different gloves. Same thing with boots, right? Boots and shoes and things like that. Your shoes are you. Right. And so they've stripped away who you are to bring you into this complex, which is like you're going into the womb. You're going back to the basics. You're going back to, you're being stripped away of who you are. And it's a really important mythological step and psychological step to get down to the base of who you are, be deconstructed so that you can be built back up again once you are reborn. It's really, really important. But the shoes themselves, I thought was like wild. It's I don't even know if it was purposeful, but like that's exactly symbolically what's happening to all these people. They are being stripped away of their individualization because of the Empire.
Yeah, dehumanized.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they're given uniforms to all look the same, basically, right? So
exactly, yes. And because Syril has been kind of in a very similar situation, but in his own, like he is a cog in the Imperial machine, right?
Yeah.
They cut from the shoes on the ship directly to looking at his feet in the isolation cube on the
cubicle
floor.
of doom. Yeah.
The cubicle of, like the cone of silence kind of thing. It had that vibe. And it was just like a brilliant cut to his shoes, which are these like half boots. They're black. You scroll up, you view up towards his suit. It's all gray on black. And he has like kind of like the Star Wars version of a tie. And it's this incredibly white room with this, black circle around him, kind of pinning him in the chair. And then we have Deirdre, our lady in white, walk in and be like, stop doing these false reports.
Mm-hmm.
I love this scene so much because
the interrogation room is great.
Yeah, because she recognizes that he can't let go of what has happened, but he's also really not of use to her. But it also kind of drove her nuts that Blevin didn't really do his job correctly. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, because she gave him the report. It was great. Right.
Yeah. Like read this and see if it matches up with what really happened. And that's right. Yeah.
So, like, Deirdre shows her, both of them, interestingly, show a sense of justice.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going back to my whole, like, they're going to turn out to be rebels in the end.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Even though she's going to be the main antagonist, I know, right? For this first part of the season, I feel like she sought justice for him in that he could read what he signed. And he seeks justice for murdered people, right? It's not necessarily order that they're both after. They're after a sense of justice and a sense of purpose. And it's really, really interesting to see them in some ways succeed and flounder under the imperial system. And they're paired as a pair almost to show us, like, Deirdre's highly efficient, very, very smart. And I feel like it's all going to end in ruin for her.
Yeah. Yeah. Probably at the end of season 1 or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. It's like we've talked about since like the very first episode or two that like Syril, even though he was like, completely misguided and, like basically a cop, at the end of the day, he felt that he was trying to do the right thing within the system that he had bought into. And so it's just a matter of like, at what point did they reach the breaking point where they're like, okay, the system isn't doing anything for me. I think like the visual parallels of like basically his little imperial cubicle being like a prison cell, that's all very deliberate and cool.
And then him being moved into like the actual sort of interrogation room that is like a larger version of his little prison cell. And, Cassian being in a prison cell as well. Like all of these are very interesting visual parallels that we're trying to remind us that all of these people are trapped within the system and nobody's really quote unquote evil except for the emperor. And well, even, he could be redeemed someday. At least he was in the Lego version.
I love those movies. Yeah.
Sure. Like it was the Lego
Christmas one.
Christmas special. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. I keep that in my heart that Sheev Palpatine was redeemed in the Christmas special. But we also get that she has to give this report as well in amongst dealing with Syril, who's just like wasting her time in her perspective. And he's just trying to use the tools that he can legitimately use to try and do what he feels he's owed by the society, right? This is another like, I was falsely accused situation. I mean, he's not on the level. He's not very with it realistically on what actually happened.
Sure.
Because like all the things he listed in the report that were missing were not real. Like his commanding officer wasn't like criminally negligent. There wasn't extra people on Ferrix helping him out. Things like that, right?
Gotcha. Yeah. I don't know. It's funny how they they have the same goal essentially, and like they could accomplish a lot if they work together, but it's like we're still trapped in that whole thing of I'm thinking about her in the ISB room where like they're all kind of at each other's throats, and so she sort of refuses to see like, okay, this is a guy who wants to basically help me, like he desperately wants to help her, and they have the same goals, but like she's sort of trapped in that cycle of just like it, there's a winner and a loser in the Empire, like every scenario with like the Empire.
It has to be binary, right? When we've talked lots about how creating false binaries is a tactic, right?
Yeah,
is a tactic to convince you that you are either good or bad, right? You're not some sort of version of a thing in between, like everybody is, right? It's fascinating. I really enjoyed having Wolf Yularen back on screen.
He's like falling asleep during her presentation.
He's just like looking at his hands or whatever.
Yeah, he's like, I don't care.
Yeah, like, and I loved this moment because it felt so. Whoever wrote this has been in a corporate meeting where a higher up person is like, I don't know, on their phone or checking their email.
Oh, yeah.
While you're like trying to explain this like really, really important thing, and they're not like giving you their attention.
Yeah.
And like the pregnant pause, like, hey, I just said this thing. He's like, I'm listening. And then she had to realize like she just has to keep on talking until he stops her. I really loved that so much. And then the call out to say that Luthen, or the older man, that his accomplice was Axis, was such a great, like, I don't know if it's gonna turn into the rebels calling that person Fulcrum, or if it's just a nod to say the Empire, or at least she, understood it enough to call out what this represented for the rebels already.
Oh, okay. So yeah, kind of like how the Fulcrum character in Rebels, like Ahsoka or whoever it is at a given point, like they sort of are the information person between all the different cells, right? Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, like I think at some point Luthen steps down from being that person and becomes more active with the spies.
Okay.
Like it only makes sense that he would want to get more involved.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unless he dies. I mean, he may die. He may die. I don't know.
He may get involved and then die immediately afterwards. But yeah, it's he's really itching to get some more action. Like he loved sending a message with the heists. So, yeah.
Yeah. Like I think either we'll get a more active Luthen next season, or he's gonna die trying to get back into the field.
Sure.
I get that vibe.
Yeah.
Anyways, she wraps up her meeting with Wolf Yularen, who, like, I loved Yularen so much in the Clone Wars.
Oh,
cartoon,
right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, he was so good.
I sort of think of him as the narrator, even though I'm sure it's not supposed to be like that, but because it sounds so like Tom Kane,
Yeah, like Tom Kane, yeah. Yeah. And he's also that guy on the Death Star, of course, right? Like people have to acknowledge he's one of the dudes. He's the ISB person on the Death Star. But so she wraps up with that, and then the end of kind of her time right now is basically warning Cyril against wasting her time again. I feel like he's gonna spot something that will, because like Cassian's role on Ferrix was related to fuel, and he's in charge of fuel. I feel like there's gonna be something like that he's gonna come back.
Interesting. Yeah.
What do you think of that?
Yeah,
maybe
that makes
it was
sense.
maybe it was what he said or he false reported. I don't know. I might be confused, but I feel like he's going to come back with actual genuine information through legitimate means and prove his usefulness to her.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't want to like jump ahead too far, but yeah, I feel like they're leading it toward, Luthen or Vel like maybe ending up like being how Cassian gets out, and then it just like the prison goes to hell and everybody escapes. I don't know, but it's interesting because we see one of the other like rebels from Rogue One is there with him.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I have his name somewhere here. I was like the guy at the table looks familiar. His name is Ruscott Melshi.
Melshi. Yeah.
He's like sort of always around in Rogue One from like the Battle of Scarif and stuff. So yeah, he's like the guy who he gives them like a ward. Like getting out now is just a dream. Those days are over.
Oh, he's the one who gives him that pep talk.
Yeah, nice. Exactly.
That's great. No. Okay, so I have a whole theory about the prison, so let's get into it.
Cool. Sure.
We're at Narkina 5 and they have arrived into the mouth of the whale. They're literally, and the guy's like, smell the air. This is the last fresh air you're going to smell for a while. I mean, belly of the whale journey stuff. Like you're about to be swallowed by the whale, right? But we get this lovely welcome by one of the prison guards who's like, you guys will all consider this to be a vacation if you've been imprisoned before. It's really not that tough, but you kind of might be wondering why, I have no weapons. It's because of this, and we see, of course, the boots on the officers, very clear. They look like ski boots or snowboarding boots. Like they're very thick and for their protection. And Kyle, when I was watching this with my husband, Kyle, he was like, oh, this is the 4th season of The Floor is Lava.
Yeah, it's like, just like wherever you are in the prison, you just get like zapped like crazy. Yeah. And they call it like getting fried. So
yeah. The floor is lava in this prison. Yeah. That is the situation. But also this brings back our shoe metaphor / symbolism, right? These gentlemen, because it's like an all-male prison, it looks like, right? These guards are under this pretense that they are protected because they are participating in the Empire.
Right. Yep. That's a big theme in this show, I feel.
Yeah. That you're protected from the Empire because you are helping the Empire.
Yeah.
And it's just like a false concept in this. How many sides does the complex have?
How many sides does the complex have?
Yeah, like the big thing floating in the water. I didn't get to count how many you see from space or when you're arriving, but how many there are.
It's 5, right? Or no?
No, there's 7.
7. Okay. Yeah, it looks sort of like the big shield gate in Rogue One kind of, right? But
yeah, it does sort of, but there's 7 sides. Yeah. I counted because I'm like, this is a weird looking hexagon. No, it's because it's a septagon.
Nice. Good catch.
And I was like, oh my God. Interestingly, the halls either have 6 sides, like because they're like the hexagons, or they have like a tiny little side on either side, so 8. It's interesting. I was like, could they have made them 7-sided? That would have been really interesting if they could have done that, but no, they didn't manage to pull it off. They still have that vibe, right? Like that hexagon shape is everywhere in this building. And so they bring him down to his particular room, and Cassian is like, they do a really good job of focusing on his face to basically show how he's absorbing all of the nuances of their social systems and rules. Right? The zap rod, we can't bring him in without your partner. The partner's late. There was somebody missing. Somebody called in sick. But this is on the schedule. they did a really good job of giving us all of these like puzzle pieces that he will eventually use later.
Yeah. And even like the training, like the factory floor stuff, like clearly he wants to master that so that he can, I don't know, I guess minimize his pain in the beginning, but also like, that may come in handy in some other way of like, like they get sort of privileges, you either get like punished if you're last, and if you're first, you get like privileges. So we'll see if that leads to some opportunity to escape or something. I don't know.
Yeah. And then we get Andy Serkis back in Star Wars.
Yeah.
I feel like this is like just, I don't know, just a joy to have him back. Like, I don't know. He's just such a good actor, and to have him back not as Snoke is like amazing. So he's Kino Loy, which is like, I don't know the name. It's funny, but he's the unit manager, and he has this whole speech he's worked out, right? Like 5-2D, level 5, room 2, day shift. That's what that stands for. 7 levels of the factory, 7 rooms per level, 7 tables per room, and then 7 men on each table. Okay.
Yep.
Repeated 7s. And the building itself is 7. And there's probably, some other 7, like the 7 there. I mean, if I had to go back and freeze frame it, I bet you there's 7 complexes on the planet, Narkina 5, like 7 of the floating things. Cause that's the sort of thing. Cause that would mean there was like 7 layers to everything. So not just 7s of 7s, there's 7 sevens.
Yeah. 7 sins and all that.
Yeah, well, and 7 virtues, right?
Yeah.
So, okay. 7. 7 is not always a lucky number, right? But 7 is a lucky number in most Western cultures, and it's because of the primarily the biblical context of it, which is God completed creating the earth in Genesis in 7 days. And the 7th day, i.e. Sunday, quote unquote, where he rested is different than the other days, because he kind of does different things in the morning, evening, like afternoon and evening in Genesis when he's creating things. But on the 7th day, it's just like, it's the 7th day. And it's all metaphor for saying that this is like never ending from here. The 7th day represents creating the earth, and all creation is continuing on from there. It's unending endlessness, and also perfection, completion. There's a sense of fulfilling a promise, right? Mm-hmm. So let's talk about that all. Like, okay, what does this mean in the context of Andor in Star Wars? This is the Empire's promise to its people. The prison is all a metaphor for all of the populace of the galaxy stuck under the Empire's rule.
Yeah.
Order means no individualization, no other options, 12-hour shifts, like that's the order that you want. And because of that, it's suffering, and the only escape is death.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
It's really, really cool stuff that they used 7s, right? 7s is also like, the idea that there are 7 sevens and 7 7 sevens, right? It means that it's like the perfect place for transformation to happen to. This is the start of something different. And I like how Andy Serkis's character, Kino Loy, is like, I need you to make me look good so that I look good. Yeah. And then the guy who's in charge of my floor is looking good. And then the guy who's in charge of the complex is looking good. And it's going to feel like you're just a cog in a massive machine then, right?
Yeah.
And what do we see them making on each of the 7 tables of the 7 floors of the 7 wings of the 7 buildings?
Yeah, like literally looks like a cog.
It literally looks like a giant imperial cog, and each of the little ends looks like it's stamped with an imperial cog. So it's like it creates that feeling of the cog within the cog, within like the endlessness, and that's purposeful because this is a metaphor for how it feels so overwhelming to transform systems from the inside, oppressive systems from the inside. You as an individual cog, right, are like, how can I possibly transform this system from the inside, especially when there's so many layers on top of me? How can I, and I'm just going about my day, eating my food, showing up at work every single day, doing my job, coming home, hopefully I don't die. How can I actually make this better? And we're going to see it. We're going to see it play out. And I disagree with you, Alex. I think it's going to come from inside. Cassian is going to inspire the rebellion from inside. It has to be.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense with the character because of, he needs to sort of awaken, which we...
Catabasis! Rebirth! Yeah. He has to see that rebellion is possible and that it does actually make things better.
Yeah. There's like this weird sort of link between Luthen and Cassian. Like there's sort of like fates are bound in this like mysterious forcey way. And Clea, I think her name is, Luthen's sort of, first lieutenant or whatever, in spy business. She says something like, I need you to wake up, basically. And, and really Cassian is the one who needs to wake up, of course. And, so that makes sense that they'll just...
Because a rebirth is you have completely torn down your construct of what you knew and are reawakened to a new reality and to your own internal power, right?
Yeah.
He's going to go through probably another episode of absolute bullcrap, and then he will probably escape in 10. Like, I just... based on kind of how they're doing the arcs. And I feel like next episode will probably be the hardest episode of the season. Just because it will officially be his catabasis and he will be at his lowest point. But he's picking up all of the knowledge and the secret things and his allies from coming into the whale at this point, right? So I have lots of faith for Cassian.
Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't talked much about mythical journeys on this podcast yet because I couldn't actually get the vibe we were on one yet.
Sure.
Isn't that interesting?
It was very, it was very sort of nuts and bolts, like spy thriller for a while or whatever, that kind of, this is clear
story. We're clearly on his transformational journey now.
Yeah, we're sort of back in like familiar Star Wars territory, but not in like any kind of negative way. It's just sort of like,
in only the good ways. Only the good ways. It's exceptional. Yeah.
Yeah, we're sort of like at the meat of he needs to become something else, and we're like almost there. There's going to be like some violent event in the next episode where blood is spilled or something, and it's going to kind of jar him out of his, like Andy Serkis comes up to him and says like, what you doing, taking a breather? Like, he's like literally not even like doing anything wrong. He's just like sort of observing for like a half a second. And it's just like, oh, you're like lazing about, like, and
so do you want to continue on talking about Narkina and like what happens with Cassian, or do you want to shift to Mon Mothma's party?
Oh, sure.
Because I think that Mon Mothma's party reinforces the symbolic messaging that we're getting with the prison really well.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah,
we can go to that. That sounds good. I'm not sure.
Okay, so she's having a party, or is it still at her house, or is it? I think it's at her house, right?
It looks like it's the same place. Yeah.
Yeah, they really got used to that set because she entertains a lot. So her and her husband are having these classic Chandrilla drinks, and we get this beautiful shot of this jar of like worms that you put in to the drink, like kind of like tequila in a way, like, right? It looks like kind of like a champagne drink, and then you add in the worm, and the worm like fries in the drink and dies, and then you drink the drink with the worm.
So it's like a symbol for Cassian right now.
No, but is it fair to the creature that's like giving up its life for the drink? That sort of thing, right?
Sure.
Yeah. And it's called like squigs or something.
Something like that. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're they cheer, and this relationship is just so interesting because like he shows up for her. Right? Like she's like, oh, let's cheer to a short evening or something like that, or concluded business quickly. And he's like, yeah, I'll cheer for that. But he's there at like every event that she's hosting.
Sure. Yeah. Her old banker buddy.
Yeah. And then Tay Colma, her banker buddy, shows up, and he's like, yeah, I'll have a drink too. I'll have a squig. Yeah. I'm trying to figure out exactly what the drinks represent, but I mean, Mon Mothma doesn't feel the need to have the worm anymore, so it's got to be significant.
Yeah, I don't know. There was that sort of image in the previous episodes where, like, because she is who she is, like, you don't see the knife to your throat or whatever because, she's sort of smoke and mirrors. With this drink, the worm is probably going about its business doing worm stuff, and then suddenly it's dead, without warning. So suddenly it's like suffering, and it's like, what the hell?
No, it could be the prison metaphor, right? Like, like how people at the top are enjoying the fruits of the labor of the prison, and this worm is just suffering and dying in this drink for their enjoyment, right?
And it's sort of like the one-way observation, like sort of like the panopticon image of like Cyril in the interrogation room, and I think there's like two-way glass or whatever. And
he was kind of a worm in a glass,
Yeah, like I think he knew that they could see him through the glass, but he couldn't see them, was the sense that I got, that it was sort of like a typical, interrogation room thing, magic mirror or whatever. So
I really loved this idea that like there's this like metaphor around this worm in this glass. How you feeling about Tay, the banking guy?
Well, see, they made him a lot less ominous in this episode, which is interesting because they got us with, is it Skeen? Skeen like sort of like whipped out the dagger and like got a little scary, and then, suddenly he was everybody's buddy again. And then it was like, he wanted to like cut everybody's throats and take all the money and run. So, I don't know. They could be like sort of lulling us into a false sense of security with Tay.
I didn't get the impression that he was any more useful to her at all, actually.
Right.
Because he kept on throwing up, regulators, auditors, like it's all like the bureaucratic red tape. And then as soon as she says, I've got 400,000, like just not attached to anything, like I have to deal with that, his eyebrows raised, like, and I swear I saw dollar signs in his eyes.
You think he's going to be like her fall guy if shit goes bad? Like she can just use him as like...
No, I literally think he's going to steal her money.
Oh, just take her money. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that would certainly be a good way to raise the stakes as the seasons go on.
I literally thought he would just like take her money and like be like, oh no, there was nothing I could do about it.
Yeah. And she's in the position of like, she can't report it missing because she's not a criminal conspirator. So
like if she was like, oh my God, this bank guy, he's like, I just would turn you in.
Yeah.
I don't trust him. Nope. This guy's not a guy that you trust. I loved that Lita was like, you're drinking squids? That's disgusting.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's like, metaphorically, she's sort of like the same as like, I don't know, any teenager who's like, it's like learning how the sausage gets made, or like the, and you're finally like, oh no, I can't, that's gross. But, hey,
sure.
It's like learning how tequila is made.
Yeah. Neil Gaiman has this great anecdote about how he was not a vegetarian or a vegan at all. And somebody gifted him like a lamb. And so he had it like butchered and ate it. And then this like little girl comes up to him at like a family friend's house and says like, you ate my pet lamb. And he's like, I'm sorry about that. And she goes, was he good? Like,
whoa.
And so, I don't know. It's kind of like a fun anecdote of just like, as soon as you sort of connect like the sentience, the humanity, the soul to something, it's just like, and Star Wars is really good about that, about making us uncomfortable with different like droid scenarios, different, creatures and things like that. So maybe the worms in the bottle are the wills or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. Sorry.
Yeah. The thing that is always really, really important to understand is that like to live is to consume, right? To live is to consume. You're always consuming something.
That's the serpent metaphor, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's also a big George Lucas thing, right? The Ouroboros, right? The never-ending snake, the snake that is consuming its own tail.
Mm-hmm.
And, like Schopenhauer, the philosopher, who basically talks about how there is no truthfully selfless act.
That sounds right. Yeah, I mean,
I
am not like super familiar with Schopenhauer, but that's definitely a school of thought that like, you're always kind of, if you're trying to like improve yourself and be a better person, there's still sort of like a selfish component to that, I guess. You want to be loved or whatever.
Yeah, and it just sort of proves false the false dichotomy, the false binary that Star Wars represents in so many ways, and is trying to show us that it's actually a third path that we can't know looking at other people's paths. We only have to take it for ourselves, right? And it's a deep thing. I talk about it all the time on the podcast, but it's that you can never be truly fully selfless, right? It's just not even possible. So you have to understand the things that you consume and try to do as little suffering as you can within your ability to still be yourself. It's deep stuff. And Star Wars usually doesn't actually talk about it directly, which is really, really interesting. So you get me to interpret it for you.
I think that's why we like these characters like Cyril and Ben Solo, right? Where it's like, oh, they fucked up big time, but we'd like to see them do better, right? We'd like to see them kind of pick themselves up off the floor and like figure their shit out. Like, I don't know. I think that's where Star Wars...
They're doing a very good job of making us feel bad for Cyril.
Yeah.
Right?
I think so. It's a gradual, slow baby steps thing, but, the actor is really carrying it. So
yeah, it's good. They're giving us a lot of time to sit with his blue milk and his cereal and his terrible mother, and life is hard for Cyril.
Yeah. And he's like contrasted with Deidre, who like was really sympathetic a couple episodes ago and is now she's sort of drunk on power. And so we're getting like this roller coaster ride of these characters, like sort of playing with the different power dynamics. And, it's all going to come crashing down because that's what empires do.
Exactly.
Ideally.
So we've kind of gotten through kind of the nuts and bolts of the main part of the Mon Mothma party. It ends with her sort of having this political discussion. There's two political discussions that kind of end up happening. One is, I want to talk about both of them. The first is she's with a group of people, and the one guy she's trying to convince to get votes, and they're all like, talking about how the galaxy is so dangerous and that they need this sense of the security, and that some of them are supporting the PROD or PORD.
Pord or whatever. Yeah.
Pord instead of prod. I swear prod was too on the nose, and then they were like, we got to change it to poured, you know, and she has this great line where it's like, you know, well, only, you always hear this at like Thanksgivings and stuff like that. Like, well, only people who do wrong are locked away. Right.
Oh, yeah.
And she's like, I'm fearing, like, what do you have to fear if you're not doing wrong things? Right. And she's like, I'm fearing your definition of wrong. Oh, so good. So good. And it's like this idea that the food that is being fed to especially this wealthy elite and these powerful people is that the empire creates order. We've heard Cyril talk about it, right? Order and protection from, you know, nefarious bad things, right? The idea that they aren't safe and need these institutions to be protected, right? It's going to be so hard for people like that to break out of the concept that, you know, the empire is actually very bad. And that's why Luthen is so hard going on trying to wake people up from, you know, the lulled sense of security, right? Is it actually secure or is it tyrannical? And then the second political conversation is actually sort of showing how Mon Mothma, due to traditions of her own, has been stuck in a marriage since she was 15, right? They were both 15 when they got married.
Yeah. They basically like stay on like opposite sides of the room and just have the daughter play like career between them. They don't really like want to interact too much.
And she became a senator at 16 and then they came to Coruscant. Like, whoa, right? That's a lot. So, I mean, Mon Mothma herself is stuck in an institutionally created construct, her marriage, that is loveless. It's a great metaphor for, you know, she herself doesn't feel like she can break free.
Yeah, it's kind of that, like,
something.
The comfort of apathy or whatever. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. All right, you ready to go back to Narkina?
Sure.
Narkina? Yeah. We get this, we're back in Narkina and Cassian is in the lineup at the end of the day after his hard day's work. And it's the tubes that are leading from, like, it's like the day shift and night shift are switching, I think. That's what they're doing, like, because it's 12-hour days, right? So the day and the night shift are switching and everybody's lined up in the hallways basically for this, like, they only do prisoner movement at this one time of day and they're all kind of waiting for everybody to be lined up so that everybody's like in position to do what they need to do. And he notices like all of the different tubes that lead from the different floors that you know, do the different things, in addition to the people who are communicating using sign language.
He was really
between the different groups.
Yeah, he was really like caught off guard by like, oh, you can communicate like across these bridges or whatever. Like that was a really heavy moment where I was like, what are they trying to say with this? But
they're trying to say this is how he's going to
they can organize together.
Yeah. Like they can organize amongst the different floors or amongst the different, because really, like, you think about it, like, would he need to take he might only need to take his floor, or he might need to take his wing, or, you know what I'm saying? Like, he's learning all of these different aspects of what are the tools that are available to him and what are the weaknesses of this facility, right?
The inmates are all like self-governed, and you have like the Andy Serkis figures who are like shift commanders, and then the shift commander, Andy Serkis, is like basically like the cell block leader too, you know, like there's like that crazy chilling line about like they only come to like remove dead bodies and replace them, you know, like otherwise they're up in the towers asleep, which is, you know, pretty much how real prison functions. You know, you got some union guys sleeping up in a tower and talking about WWE or whatever, but it's it's fascinating that with some coordination, you could take out Andy Circus and the other 6 Andy circuses and,
Yeah, and it's like, okay, not right now, but next shift, you're going to, when everybody's on the same shift, we're all going to do the same thing or something like that, right? Like it, and there's probably something about the floor being able to be disrupted with the tools and the things that they have in the room. There's probably something about that. I'm really excited to see how this plan comes together. It's really exciting because you can kind of see how they're building the puzzle pieces for it. With his face looks completely blank. Like he's doing such a good job of that. Like Diego Luna is just doing such a good job of just being blank, but he's absorbing it, and you can tell he's absorbing it by how they've framed everything. They get back into the cells, and we have that great moment that you talked about at the start of the show about give up that dream of getting out of here, just focus on today or whatever. And we get the well, if the floor is white, you can walk on it. If it's flashing, you better move.
Yeah.
And if it's red, the floor is lava. And then, they talk about the food. You can eat as much as you want. You can drink as much as you want. They want you healthy and thriving. They kind of have this tell us the number, what's happening on the outside. And it's something that I realized just now, which is that this knowledge that Cassian has of what happened and the consequences of that, because he was aware of the Pord. It's his power that he can give to the to the prisoners.
Yeah,
he could tell them what is happening, and that was a rebel attack, and yes, I've participated in that, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And then we get a 30-day flash forward, which is great.
Yeah. You have the digital readout of how many days are left in his sentence, I believe, and it's 2,189, and then it drops to 59, and sort of the reversal of Ray's like little scratches in the wall of her whatever Jakku AT-AT cave, which is cool. But yeah, so you get the sense after 30 days of working in like a prison factory, like he's gonna have mastered, how that factory stuff works, and so makes you wonder what they're gonna do. Like if they're gonna make those cogs into some kind of bridge across the floor, or I don't know.
What are they gonna do with these cogs? Yeah,
I don't know. I could see them using it to
It's going to be a metaphorical answer, I feel, like a symbolic answer. Like they're going to have to use the cogs to tear down the infrastructure of the thing. Like it has to, like using the weapons that they were creating against them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got to be something like that. We just end with Cassian with like the death in the cell, right, at one point. And like him going about his day, right? So the guy decides to basically commit suicide.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Like I had in my notes, like, was this suicide? Was this like an accident? But
totally suicide.
It seemed like it was. Yeah. So it's very dark. Yeah, to go from that to dark. Then you go from that to like him in the factory, and they're just like a well-oiled, like a Swiss watch, just doing the thing perfectly, and So there's got to be some kind of catalyst, I guess.
Yeah, there's going to be something, right? A change, right? He's not quite there yet. Because he has to, he's become, like, if you compare it to Obi-Wan cutting his fish, his desert stingray or whatever it was, like, it's very similar to that.
Yeah.
Right? It feels, the vibe is very similar, right? You can start to recognize these things when you see them. Okay, so back to Ferrix and like the ISB plot and the Luthen stuff, right? Let's finish this off.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I kind of finished Narkina because it's like there isn't much else there other than we know he's kind of in his routine and he's very stuck in his routine at this moment.
Sure.
We'll get more next episode. But I love Fiona Shaw so much. She is
the first Marva.
She is the first femme crone in Star Wars.
She's incredible. And in this episode, kind of heartbreaking. Like, she's like fallen and isn't like doing super well.
This hit me a lot because like my mom fell a fair amount before she passed, and it's just it hit me right in the I know Marva's probably gonna die, and it hurts.
This is tough.
Yeah, and you know, I loved how Bix was like, and you haven't even complained, and she's like, oh, my mother was a whiner, and that'll cure you of that. Yeah, but she is full on I have this episode called Dark Feminine in Star Wars, and Marva is the first crone officially that is feminine in Star Wars. So let's celebrate Marva. Yeah, and there's a reason she's the first crone in Star Wars, because she was the mother to Cassian, and she refused to go with him, and that instantly turns her into the thing. Like, she's not willing to go off on the adventure, right? She is stuck in her hut, and she's gonna be doing what's good for, or she may turn into the first crone. She's doing what's good for the kingdom, right? She's gonna rebel. She's gonna stay here. I still think that we will get that, like, you know, passing words of wisdom on to Cassian, and that will be the moment that she is fully transformed into that character, which is great. But I love that Bix and Brasso are like watching out for Marva. I love that. Yeah, Bix is sort of like over like all the other stuff in the past now, and it's like, she's like looking out for her, and you know, concerned about Cassian, and or you know, wants to get Cassian to you know, come back and help out with her or whatever. And so there's this sense of like using technology to reach out to him, and of course he's not gonna be able to answer, so that's like this tragic thing. There's like a lot of sort of like angsty little tragic beats in this little section of the episode where we also get some groundwork potentially laid out to how Bix will get out of trouble, which is the old tunnel underneath the hotel, right? She was trying to check if that was still, you know, around or accessible. We also get this introduction of sort of a social construct of the daughters of Ferrix, which is so cool. Like, it's it you know, like sorority and fraternal organizations. So like the Daughters of the American Revolution, you know, groups through the church, right? The Masons, you know, a lot of these sort of groups that formed out of like the you know, fraternal, right? Like they're meant to protect other people in an effort that you understand that, you know, not everybody's going to be at their strongest. They're a form of unionization. They're a form of societal protection when society fails its weakest members. And she used to be the president of the Daughters of Ferrix and is refusing their help, which is so like interesting, right? Because she's too proud or whatever of, you know, she's like, I'm already the leader. I don't need to protect those. I don't need to be protected. I need to protect others, right? Which shows her exactly where she is in her journey, right? But I love that there's this thing about the world that exists, the Daughters of Ferrix, who help others, like charitable organization. Oh, just, it's such a lived in world. It feels so good. It's definitely not, you know, like sort of it's like a forest planet. It's a desert planet. No, like there's a lot of life to Ferrix. You know, ever since, you know, we sort of started with like the bell tower guy, and you know, just sort of built out from there. There's like so much beautiful life to it. And then you've Vel and Cinta sort of hanging out there too, and that's interesting stuff. Did you catch the jab from Cinta to Vel? Yeah, she's like, who will you pretend to be? Oh, a rich girl running away from her family, and she's like, oh, that's cold even for you. Yeah, cold. Yeah. So like, I mean, Vel is like a rich girl. Do you think that she's Luthen's daughter?
I still kind of get the vibe that she's Luthen's daughter, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, like this sort of complicates that and kind of casts doubt on it. But getting these sort of angsty, tragic vibes where like Vel's like, can't we just like cuddle for a couple weeks and chill out and like and Cinta's
like nothing but the cause and then you get whatever's left. I'm a mirror. And she says like the thing that like pisses people off. It's like, I just show you what you want to see or whatever.
Yeah like you love me because I show you what you need to see. And it's like
that's just like a jab. I want my space lesbians to be fun, to be happy, but no, they're not on the same page because like Sint is like super committed to the cause and Vel's like, I'm committed. Yeah, but you know, I also like, I want us to be good and kiss a bit.
Yeah, I mean, you see the same conflict with like Luthen and Clea, where it's like, one is like being sort of subsumed by the cause, and one is like clinging to his humanity, which may be another clue that Vel could be his daughter. But yeah, and that you get that like beautiful dissolve where like you got Vel going this way, and then you've got Cinta going the opposite way through the window.
It was so good,
and it's like it's like their paths are diverging. And, damn. Yeah, like stuff is gonna hit the fan for sure at the end of the season, but it's just like, we're in this good moment right now where, we're seeing these relationships driving the plot more than like, you know, some MacGuffin necessarily, you know.
No, like the core of all of these things is the relationships that people have with each other, and it's so refreshing to see in Star Wars where sometimes relationships are like, we're the best of friends, but it seems like they hate each other. Like it's like, you know, like there's genuineness to every intention behind every character, and like that is some hard work on the writers and on the directors and tying it all together. And congrats Tony Gilderoy on making this like so tight and solid.
Yeah.
We get Bix, who is making the call, and it's for like a genuinely good reason, right? Like Marva's sick. She wants Cassian to have an opportunity to like come back, say goodbye, or take care of her, or you know, whatever. And it's through like her care for Cassian as well as for Marva, but she doesn't realize that like the ISB is like listening to everything like that. That shows that Deirdre was successful in getting the amount of watching that she wanted on the planet.
Yeah.
And that leads to the arrest of Pack, the guy who owns the junkyard, and his son complaining, Bix running away, getting captured anyways, and Deirdre showing up at the hotel to intimidate the hell out of Bix. Yeah,
right. It's like she says, no, like leave him. I want her to see him. And he's all beat up.
With Pack, yeah. A scary chair, right? She looked so scared at the chair. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we sort of cut away like before the interrogation starts, right? And then we just sort of go back to Cassian, I think.
At some point we do, but I was kind of keeping all of the Ferrix stuff together. So
sure.
We'd already talked about Clea and Luthen and like how Clea's like, I need you to wake up and get your head in the game.
Yeah.
You've been hiding too long. You're too invested in this Cassian guy. Like, give it up. So he ends up doing his job and going in and speaking with Saw. And the whole point of this kind of subdiversion is just for him to try to convince all of the disparate pieces to get together. And I feel like this, in combination with what we're seeing in the end with the answer to his ask of Saw, is going to be whatever Cassian learns in the prison, right? So how they framed it is Luthen has this problem where all of these disparate people, and, you know, Saw Gerrera coming back is just great, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, you know, I've got all these disparate things and I need you guys to all work together, and I'm going to bribe you with all of this, you know, fun technology that you need because you don't have much. And so I was like, nah, I don't believe in any of these guys. I'm not on the same page as any of these guys. And I feel like in the answer to that scene, we got the Narkina like focus on Andor in the middle of the machine, right? He has to learn his way out of this labyrinth. He has to learn how to get the 7 floors, the 7 rooms, the 7 like all of the 7 tables, all of the 7 people. He has to learn how to make that the perfection that means that he can get all of these disparate rebel groups to work together. And he will come back with what mythically we're all talking about, which is the elixir.
Yeah.
Right? He will come out of this experience in the prison with the boon, the elixir, the thing that he needs to know, which is how do you get people who are so caught up in their own day-to-day, Saw Gerrera and his rebels, the Anton Krieger's separatists, the other ones they mentioned. How do you get all of these disparate people into an alliance? And we're going to learn that through the prison break.
Interesting.
Yeah?
Yeah. So you thinking it's like a speech he's going to give or something?
I think it's going to be a truism, right?
Oh, okay.
Like a way to frame his experience. And it's going to give Luthen and Andor, when he's making these contacts or he's working with these people, it can happen. Look, we have a story to tell you about a prison break, right? We were separate. We couldn't communicate. We were kept separate from each other on purpose, but we found the language to communicate. Right?
Yeah.
And that's the secret is finding the common way to communicate with these disparate people, to say we're actually all on the same side. We all want the same thing.
Deidre mentions like asking for a code droid, which feels like some kind of foreshadowing of something. I don't know. It kind of makes me think of like the Viper droids, like the way they sort of talk in that robot nonsense, like
Isn't what kind of droid is K2SO?
I think I just remember him being called like an Imperial security droid, but I guess
we did see them on that planet that he choked out Cassian. So
yeah, like Niasmos or something like that, whatever that planet was called. Yeah.
Well, I'm like hyped for the next 4 episodes. I don't know. It's just like it's amazing. I'm super excited for what's to come, and it's all good.
It's a phenomenal show.
Any final thoughts, Alex Kane?
Well, I don't know. I just I'm thinking, factory and everything sort of smooth sailing until it isn't. So I'm just worried about these other guys at his table, like who's going to lose like a hand or something, and some kind of.
The old guy's gone. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's my thought too. I think they foreshadowed that something was going wrong with his performance, or something. Or something happened and it was like, be patient.
I love him. He's so sweet, but no.
Yeah, that's
I would be shocked if he survived. I want him to survive. I'm going to pull for him, but
I would love that too. But I had the thought too that he is gonna get some kind of tragic thing is gonna happen, and that's gonna be the catalyst for we can't keep this up forever, so we have to get out of here. And of course, all this THX imagery happens throughout the last couple episodes, and that movie ends with, climbing to the surface and emerging into the sunlight. So, I look forward to that beautiful image coming to pass, hopefully. And I like in Michael Bay's The Island when they all sort of do that at once,
Yeah. It's been over 20 years since I've seen THX. 113, so
been a long time for me.
I will make an effort to watch it before next week's episode, so I can actually speak to it because it's been so long. I literally cannot remember anything.
I mostly remember images and like a few key beats. Yeah. So yeah, I need to sort of like try to find my DVD copy because it's somewhere. But yeah, I haven't seen it since for a long time.
I don't believe it's that long either, so I'll force myself to find a copy and get it done, friends, so I can speak to it with what I see. But
yeah, I'll try to do the same. I'm sure it's on HBO or something.
I've had a lot of like very nice positive feedback recently on the show, and I'm living for it. So keep it up. I'm really enjoying people who have been listening to this. We had some very nice people say they really appreciate us, Alex. So,
well,
that's
too kind, but yeah, all credit to you, I guess.
No, they appreciate our voices, right? And everything.
Thank you.
So,
thank you.
Yeah. So, Alex, where can people find you if they're looking for you online?
Mostly on Twitter, way too much at Alex J. Kane, Kane.
Thank you so much for joining us, and we will be back next week. Cheers. Thank you for listening to What the Force. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, your host. Our music is provided by Christy Carew for What the Force. We have a Patreon at patreon.com/whattheforce. We would like to thank all our patrons, especially those who love and are obsessed with What the Force. Cheryl, Melody, Night Huntress, In Wild Space, How Rude, Anna Perez, Neil, Joe Allen D, Christian Luca, Josh Johnson, Scott C, and Susan. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube or leave a 5-star review on iTunes or other pod apps. It helps people find the show. Check out our other channel on YouTube, What the Fiction. You can connect with us on Twitter at WT Force Show, What the Force Podcast on Facebook, and our website, whattheforce.ca. We also have a Discord. Links are in the liner notes. Feel free to reach out and start a conversation. Cheers.